Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is Thursday, August the 1st, 2024. It has been 3,838 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 162 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, and 2 years and 159 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression. Today's podcast covers the events that happened on Wednesday and Thursday morning. You may find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. There is a link in the podcast description, and there are map updates today. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. 1. We maintain that for the next 4 days, the risk of additional significant missile and drone attacks on Ukraine remains elevated. 2. Russian forces have breached Ukrainian defenses at Pokrovsk and will likely continue to advance west and southwest due to favorable terrain. Despite the breach, Russian losses of armor, mobility and personnel are unsustainable. 3. Russia will continue to make tactical gains during its current offensive, but low troop morale, poor battlefield medicine, corruption and degraded logistics make it unlikely that Russian forces can achieve their 2024 operational goals. 4. The Ministry of Defense of Ukraine remains unsuccessful in de-Sovietizing its senior commanders and meeting its obligations to properly train all new troops, resulting in preventable battlefield errors. 5. Persistent delays in the delivery of promised military hardware, munitions and funding continue to prevent the Ukrainian armed forces from reaching their full combat potential. 6. The policy of escalation management implemented by the NATO alliance and the United States, and to a small extent Germany, is a failure. We assess that the risk of a serious international incident is increasing due to Moscow's belief that NATO is unlikely to respond. 7. We maintain that without a solution to restore air parity that slows the use of Russian glide bombs, Ukrainian troops will continue to be forced to withdraw as Russia destroys every defensible position and location. 8. Russia will continue to commit increasingly worse violations of international humanitarian law until international watchdogs and Ukraine's allies take a unified and firm stance. 9. Russia's sustained attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which has destroyed over 80% of its combined thermal and power plant capacity, is a continuation of Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 4 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. 10. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction and stability paradox. 11. The attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear facilities in Ukraine. Russia continues its attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure. Yesterday, at least 3 civilians were killed and 27 wounded. In the Kharkiv Oblast, the VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, bombed Veliki Burluk. When state emergency services arrived, one of the firefighters learned his home had been bombed. His 37-year-old wife, Inna Zamesova, was killed, and their 10-year-old son is in hospital with serious burns. Zamesova was also an employee of the state emergency services, but was not on duty. A video captured the unnamed husband and father sitting in the still burning debris by his dead wife. That isn't an easy watch, but we link to the video in today's situation report. and there's more information in the podcast description. On the night of July the 31st and August the 1st, Russia launched 7 Shahed-136 one-way drones and multiple Iskander-M short-range ballistic missiles. All 7 Shaheds were intercepted. One Iskander-M struck Izum, injuring a 58-year-old woman, and falling drone debris wounded 2 in Kyiv region. Another Iskander-M was intercepted over Dnipro, indicating that one of the new Patriot or SAMPT air defense systems has been stationed in the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. During the July the 30th and the 31st drone attack, 5 Shaheds, or their Russian analogues, flew through Belarusian airspace, including one that traveled for 260 kilometers. Analysis of recent drone debris showed that some of the UAVs were Russian Gerberat drones, which are a less sophisticated version of the Iranian-designed Shahed. Now for today's action report summary. On Wednesday, Russia carried out 156 assaults, and through July the 31st, the 7-day moving average for daily attacks was at 139. The VKS carried out 77 airstrikes, dropping 103 bombs on civilian and military targets. Russian ground forces carried out over 4,600 fire missions with tubed and barrel artillery. Let's dive into what happened on the battlefield. Starting in the Kharkiv Oblast, we begin in the Liptsi-Vovchansk area of operation, or AO. Fighting continued in Vovchansk and Hlyboke with no change in the situation. Russian forces continued their attempts to advance in the direction of Tykhe, with the VKS providing close air support. In the Kupiansk AO, Russian forces attacked in the direction of Stepovanovo-Selivka, with Ukrainian forces holding their defensive lines. Assaults were also carried out in the direction of Kolesnikivka from occupied Peshchane and on the southern edge of Berestove. In the Svatove AO of the Luhansk Oblast, Russian attempts to advance in the direction of Andriivka were unsuccessful. Ukrainian forces were able to recapture the ridge that overlooks the Zherebets River at Serhiivka, just west of occupied Raihorodka. Finally, in the Kremena AO, fighting continued on the eastern edge of Makiivka and east of Nevske. There was no change in the situation. Now, let's talk about the Donbass and the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. In the Siversk AO, Ukrainian forces repulsed Russian assaults on Verkhnyokamyansk from Zolotarivka, south of Ivanodarivka and southeast of Vyimka. In the Kostiantynivka AO, Russian forces continued to attack from Bogdanivka, and there was heavy fighting on the western edge of the Canal district of Chasiv Yar. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, or GSAFU, reported fighting in the forested area west of Ivanivske and near Andriivka. Russian forces carried out 26 assaults in the Toretsk-New York AO, with heavy fighting reported in or in the areas of Toretsk, Pivnichne, Zalizne, Pivdenne and New York. Russian forces were able to advance 1 to 2 blocks deeper into Zalizne. Russian forces also attempted to advance in the direction of Panteleimoniivka from south of Yuriivka, using the tree lines. Thousands of civilians remain in Toretsk, where it has become too dangerous to bury the dead in the cemetery due to Russian shelling and bombing. Residents have started doing rushed burials in communal graves in gardens and people's yards. In Southwestern Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces carried out 55 assaults in the Pokrovsk AO and made new expected advances. Subordinate attacks were carried out in the direction of Kalynove and from Novo-Alexandrivka, which were repulsed. There were also assaults on the eastern edge of Vozdvizhenka. Russian troops advanced into Timofeivka in the direction of Lysychne, approximately 100 meters in the direction of Ivanivka, and toward Grodivka using the T511 highway. Our assessment that Ukrainian forces had withdrawn from the east side of the Vovcha River was accurate. Russian forces have advanced past the river, eliminating their natural defensive barrier. Russian forces advanced towards Sergeyivka and Zhelanne, which we believe will be the next defensive line for Ukrainian troops. In this area, the same terrain that forced Ukraine to withdraw will make it very difficult for Russian troops to maintain logistics along the line of conflict. Heavy fighting continued in Vasile, the one west of Progress, where Russian forces were making slow gains. Further south, fighting in the area of Yasnobrodivka continued, and Russian forces remained stuck between Netailov and Karlivka. In occupied Donetsk, a Russian Mi-8 helicopter was shot down shortly after taking off, with the loss of the airframe and crew. Russian sources initially reported it as a friendly fire incident. Russian propagandist fighter bomber claimed the helicopter was struck by a Ukrainian first-person view one-way drone, causing it to crash. In the Vuhledar area, Russian troops continued their assaults. Russian and Ukrainian sources reported that fighting continued in the northern part of Krasnohorivka. Ukrainian military analyst and the editor-in-chief of Cenzor.net, Yuri Butusov, told the New Voice of Ukraine that Russia took control of Krasnohorivka days ago, and that Kyiv was, quote, too ashamed to confirm the withdrawal. Russian mercenary mill blogger Vogonza reported that, quote, cleansing was still ongoing in the northern areas. We maintain our earlier assessment that Ukraine still controls a small northwest area that could be described as a panhandle, similar to the state of Oklahoma in the US. Further south, fighting was reported in the area of Georgiivka, the center part of Paraskoviivka, near Kostiantynivka, and in the direction of Vodyane. In the Vremivka area, Russian attempts to advance in the direction of Velika Novosilka from occupied Urozhaine were unsuccessful. Here is my Theaterwide update. The Russian Ministry of Defense announced it was starting the third stage of tactical nuclear weapon deployment drills using Iskander-M missiles. The ministry said that during the drills, quote, the personnel of the Russian Aerospace Forces units involved in the exercise will also practice arming aerial weapons with special warheads and conducting sorties to designated patrol areas. This just in, no one cares. We're over it. In breaking news, Russian oppositionist and Ukrainian freedom fighter Ilya Ponomarev survived an assassination attempt outside of his home in Kyiv region. He was struck by a drone and suffered serious cuts and bruises. The Chinese Central Military Commission added drones with high-precision measuring equipment to an export ban list that will take effect on September the 1st. These are different from consumer drones, such as the DJI Mavic, and provide targeting and surveillance data. The move by Xi Jinping's government comes only days after Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba's first visit to China since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. Beijing has regularly denied Western accusations that it supplies Moscow with dual-use products for military purposes. Ukrainian engineers continue to work on the development of drones armed with kinetic projectile weapons for air-to-air drone combat. A video shows one being tested in combat conditions has a swivel-mounted firearm with an extensive stabilization system. The drone fired a single projectile at a Russian drone, destroying it. There were widespread reports online and from news sources The Telegraph and Bloomberg that F-16s from Denmark are combat operational with the armed forces of Ukraine. The Telegraph went one step further, claiming that F-16s were involved in air defense activity on July the 31st. Many pictures and videos circulated online claiming that F-16s were flying combat air patrol over Lviv and Odessa, but were later dismissed as misattributed or manipulated media. Kyiv, Washington, and Copenhagen refused to comment. Here's what's happening in the land of Mobiks, Mobilization and the Mir. mass raids at businesses employing migrants continued across Russia, with the Ministry of Internal Affairs releasing a video from Yekaterinburg showing dozens being rounded up. Russian autocrat Vladimir Putin ordered the federal subsidy for volunteers joining the armed forces of the Russian Federation to more than double from 195,000 rubles to 400,000. That's $4,660 through the rest of the year. He also, quote, recommended that the federal subjects of Russia increase regional bonuses to 400,000 rubles. The minimum monthly salary for new Russian soldiers has exploded to 210,000 rubles a month, more than triple their average salary and equal to the base pay of senior enlisted personnel in the United States military. The rapidly increasing bonuses are creating friction among Russian soldiers, with Mobiks who were activated in September 2022 paid 35,000 to 41,000 rubles a month with no signing bonuses. Despite the offers, thousands of Russian soldiers have complained publicly of never receiving their signing bonuses and not being paid above the base 35,000 rubles a month. Russian state media, residents, and people living in the occupied territories of Ukraine are reporting that YouTube has been blocked or is running so slowly that it has been rendered unusable. Roskomnadzor has been attempting to block the platform since 2022. Roskomnadzor also fined Google $58,000 and TikTok $47,000 for, quote, failing to identify content that is extremely similar to the content they had previously been ordered to remove. Russia has a partial TikTok and Google services ban in place, with users only able to view certain content, articles and websites. Like us, our Google News feed was banned in Russia in March 2022. Our European threat section is usually for our subscribers only, but there were some major events yesterday. Russian spies, using their aliases Ludwig Gish and Maria Rosa Mayer-Munoz, were convicted of espionage and sentenced to 18 months in prison by a Slovenia court and then immediately expelled. The couple arrived in 2022 using Argentinian passports, claiming to run an art gallery. They were arrested in December 2022. Moldovan law enforcement arrested a government official who worked for the parliament and another with the border police and charged them with treason. Quote, one is suspected of treason after allegedly collecting and delivering information to an embassy in Chisinau to be used to the detriment of the interests of the Republic of Moldova, while the second one is accused of conspiracy through maintaining contact with an employee of an embassy. The embassy involved was not identified. Romanian officials reported they found more Russian Shahed 136 one-way drone debris from attacks on July the 24th or the 25th near the settlement of Chatalkoi. The Ministry of National Defense of Romania remained consistent, responding to the multiple violations of its airspace with a statement, quote, we also confirm our decisive signal regarding our condemnation of the attacks carried out by the Russian Federation against Ukrainian civilian facilities and infrastructure, which are unjustified and seriously contradict the norms of international law. Since 2008, autocrat Putin has repeatedly demonstrated he does not care about the norms of international law. And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.